Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our SERPPAS and Southern Fire Exchange virtual workshop this afternoon on PM 2.5, prescribed fire, exceptional events, and a wide range of associated topics. My name is David Godwin, and I'm the director of the Southern Fire Exchange program with the University of Florida. And I'm excited to be co-hosting the program today and working with our partners at SERPPAS to help make this happen. We're joined today with Addie, Thornton, and Jennifer Fawcett, and really a whole talented group of speakers that we'll see coming up just a minute. They'll be talking about the recently revised PM 2.5 NAAQS, and as well as their impacts on prescribed fire and SERPPAS programs across the Southeast. As a partner, we just wanted to share a little bit of information about the Southern Fire Exchange in case you haven't worked with us before. You know, we're a regional program for fire science delivery in the Southeast. We're a collaboration between the University of Florida, Tall Timbers, and NC State University, and we're funded by the Joint Fire Science Program. We're part of the nationwide Fire Science Exchange Network, and with our network of partners, we work to develop programs, opportunities, and events that bridge the divide between the fire science and natural resource management communities in the Southeast. If you're joining us today from an area outside of the Southeast, welcome. We're glad you're here. And if you're up in the mountains or over to the west of us, we encourage you, wherever you are, to reach out and connect with your Fire Science Exchange Network in your region. You can go to firescience.gov. That's the Joint Fire Science Program's website. Find a map like this one, and that map will get you right to the Fire Science Exchange Network in your neck of the woods. As you can see, we've got the agenda on the screen now, and we have really a top-notch lineup of speakers that are going to be covering a wide range of topics from smoke to prescribed fire and pretty much everything in between relative to this topic in the Southeast. Like I said, we have time saved at the very end for Q&A. Jen Fawcett will be our moderator for that. So please get your questions in the Q&A as we get through the program today. So it's my pleasure at this point to hand things over to Addie Thornton.
Thanks so much, David. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited to represent SERPPAS and to host this conversation with you all today. It's really great to see how many folks are on from all across the region. So welcome. I'm going to start with just a quick overview of SERPPAS, and then we'll get to our awesome lineup of speakers. So I serve as the coordinator of SERPPAS, and SERPPAS stands for the Southeast Regional Partnership for Planning and Sustainability. It is a voluntary collaboration among state leaders from natural resource, working lands, and environmental protection agencies from North Carolina to Mississippi, regional leaders from their federal agency counterparts, as well as leaders from the Department of Defense and each of the military services in the Southeast. We refer to these leaders as the SERPPAS principles, and SERPPAS allows them to work together to identify challenges, increase coordination, and solve problems across the region. Next slide. The vision of SERPPAS is a partnership of Southeastern state, military, and federal agencies working together to sustain and advance national defense, natural resource conservation, climate resilience, and working lands in support of the communities and the economies that depend on them. Next slide. This vision is realized through the SERPPAS strategic plan, which serves as a framework for identifying and implementing collaborative solutions to various challenges affecting national defense. The 5 focus areas are listed here on the screen and represent the overlap of the priorities from the SERPPAS agencies. Each focus area is supported by a work group lead or leads and a network of active partners that are identifying priority actions, pursuing projects, and sharing lessons learned across the six-state geography. The work groups function as the widest engagement opportunity for SERPPAS, including folks from NGOs, universities, states outside the SERPPAS footprint, installation staff, industry partners, and many more. We're going to be joined today by 4 of our 5 working group leads, and you'll hear from all of them. If you're not already engaged in a SERPPAS work group, we would love to have you. You can learn more about each of them on our website, and you can actually request to join directly on the website, or you can reach out to me as well. So now I'm going to pass it to Jen Fawcett, who is the lead for our prescribed fire working group. She's going to talk more about that and why we're specifically here today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Addie. And thanks, David. Nice to see everybody here today. When we were putting this together, we had no idea what level of interest outside of our prescribed fire working group there would be for this webinar, but obviously there's a lot of interest. So I see a lot of names and faces here that are not part of our fire working group. So whether you're a part of another working group or just learning about SERPPAS, we're happy to have you here today to learn about this topic. As David mentioned, we have a really great lineup of speakers today. So we tried to pull together people who are working on the NAAQS issue from across our working group, and then also people who have experience on this topic. This was a topic that came up at the SERPPAS principals meeting a couple months ago as a topic of interest across multiple agencies. And so we thought that it might be useful to get this information out to other groups and other people as well, just beyond the people that were in the room that day. So that was kind of the impetus for pulling this together, was to invite all of our working groups and others, any other interested folks, to come and learn and listen about this topic, since it's impacting prescribed fire and potentially other areas as well. So with that being said, at that same meeting, one of the outcomes of that meeting on this topic, and after that panel presentation, was the creation of a smoke sub-working group. So we have our larger prescribed fire working group, and now we have a sub-working group. We have Johnny Sabo here with us today, who's the leader of that sub-working group. So I'll just pass it off to him now to briefly give you an overview of what that group is up to as well.
Yep. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'll be fairly brief on kind of the sub-working group and where we are. It was born, as Jen said, from the meeting we had there in Gulfport. And just a lesson to the group: be careful what you ask for. I asked the SERPPAS principals to kind of take up the banner of PM2.5 and the concern it causes for all of us and potential issues, and they agreed, and then here I am. So it's just careful what you ask for. But really what came of it was a subgroup with a bunch of driven individuals who have the same goal in mind. I don't think we have to talk to anybody on this call about the need for prescribed fire and why it's important for a multitude of reasons. But essentially what came of it was a core group of folks. A few of them you're going to hear from today: Rick Gillam, Jim Boylan, Bill Ross, Angel with DOD, and myself. And what we're trying to do is streamline the best we can the prescribed fire within the exceptional events rule. So instead of taking congressional actions, trying to change rule, policy, anything else, everything's already been put into place. So how do we work within the confines of that to automate the process, to make it an easier lift on EPD, on EPA, on the state agencies, and get everybody coming from the same sheet of music. So that's really what we're working on. We hope to have a template in place by end of the month, maybe beginning of August. Start pushing it up, asking hard questions, pushing it out to a larger committee, let them shoot holes in it, kind of do some peer review, if you will. And then from there, take it to the national level with DOD carrying the banner. So that's what the group is working on. I throw it out there, say if there's anybody else working on something similar, certainly don't want to duplicate efforts. Happy to merge the groups or do anything else we can. So if there's ideas or interest around it, feel free to shoot myself, Jen, Addie, any one of us an email, and we're happy to bring you in. But I will pause it from there, ask if there's any questions or anybody has any input to the group that's going forward. And if not, Jen, I guess kick it back to you.
Thanks, Johnny. And David did mention this at the beginning of the meeting, but just as a reminder to folks too, that there is a Q&A chat function. So since this is a meeting and not a webinar, you all can unmute yourselves, but we ask that you just keep yourself muted throughout the meeting, and then we'll save all of the questions for folks. We have a lineup of speakers here coming up in this. So as you have questions, go ahead and use that Q&A function. And then at the very end of the meeting, I will moderate some questions. You can upvote if you see a question that you think is interesting to you, go ahead and upvote it. And the questions that we get to first, we'll try to answer as many as we can today. And then otherwise, the ones that we don't get to, we'll try to follow up with afterwards. So please use that function as needed. And I'll go ahead and introduce our first speaker. And then after that, we'll pass it along. Addie's going to introduce the rest of our speakers. So first up, we have Rick Gillam, who is a part of our prescribed fire working group, also now a part of the smoke sub working group within SERPPAS, and just a really great partner for fire. He's with EPA Region 4. So Rick, I will pass it off to you.
Okay, thanks, Jen. And actually, I have Evan Adams here with me, and he and I are going to tag team on our presentation. I will share my screen here, and Evan is actually going to kick it off for us. Evan, are you ready?
Yep. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Evan Adams, and I'm the particulate matter expert in EPA Region 4. Work closely with Rick and others, but I'm more on kind of the policy side of things. So yeah, this first slide, I always like to include these whenever we're talking about PM, just so that everyone kind of, is on the same page. So PM is the term used for a mixture of solid particles and liquid droplets found in the air. You'll see the diagram over to the right. You have the blue circles that are PM10, and then you have the pink circles, which are PM2.5, which is it's the size, micrometers, 2.5 micrometers or less. So we're this is how EPA kind of controls and works with smoke. We don't directly work with smoke specifically, but within smoke, there's PM2.5 and PM10, which is what we do regulate. So this is our avenue to regulate smoke. Next slide. And again, EPA's mission with regulating PM2.5 and with a lot of work EPA does is to protect the environment and the public health. So fine particles, or PM2.5, are of greatest health concern. PM2.5 can enter the respiratory tract and make its way into the lower parts of the lung. And some can even, move out of the respiratory system and affect other organs. EPA did a full integrated science assessment in 2019 and connected a lot of bad things to PM2.5. You see the list there. And our at-risk populations are, young children, older adults, and then people with other pre-existing respiratory or cardiovascular diseases, minority populations, and low socioeconomic status populations. Next slide. So recently, this is kind of why we're all here, February 7th, EPA changed the standard, the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for PM2.5 from 12 micrograms per cubic meter to 9 micrograms per cubic meter. And that triggers a whole kind of 2-year process, which we refer to as the designations process. So this is just kind of an overview of some key dates that are going to be taking place. And so I'm mostly talking about the black text, but then Rick will be hitting on some of the blue text as well, because exceptional events, which prescribed fire and wildland fire fall into, are also mixed into these deadlines. But all that to say is, state recommendations will come in February 7th, 2025. And then EPA will promulgate final designations February 6, 2026. So, those time clocks are moving quickly. Unfortunately, we're working hard to get the information that folks need to carry out this process. But it is happening fairly quickly. So, yeah, those are some key dates. All right, next slide. And so this will be kind of what happens, with the initial recommendation that is sent to EPA from state governors. They'll have their recommendation of what they believe the designation status of the different areas in their state are. And then EPA takes a year to assess that. and EPA will notify state governors of, the basically 3 different categories of a designation. So you have attainment unclassifiable, and that's just, EPA's way of saying attainment, where showing the areas are, below this newly set standard of 9.0 micrograms per cubic meter. Then you have non-attainment areas. Those are the areas that are violating the NAAQS or contributing to a nearby violation. And once that status is, assigned to an area, it triggers other requirements for that area. And I'll kind of talk about a little more on the next slide of what states then have to do to meet those non-attainment requirements. And then we have unclassifiable. So in certain cases, there may be insufficient information to support a clear designation of non-attainment or attainment. So that's what we use, unclassifiable. And then lastly, EPA may also defer designating areas. So therefore extending the timeline, so EPA can defer up to a year, according to the Clean Air Act. Next slide. Yep. So, for a non-attainment area, this is just kind of a list. Again, like I said, I work kind of more on the policy side. So we work closely with state air agencies, and state air agencies would be responsible for completing this checklist of a non-attainment area SIP, is how we refer to it. And basically, in, I guess, kind of short terms, it's just a lot of extra requirements and regulations that a state would have to approve in order to assist their area to come back into attainment. So you have, RACM and RAC SIPs, you have contingency measures, but these will look different from area to area based off maybe some sources they have, maybe if it's more a mobile source issue, or if it's a more fire issue. There may be different ways they can address that, but these are kind of the checklist of items. So we have, these due dates would then come September 2027, and then an area would be required to attain at the end of the 6th calendar year, which is December 31st, 2032. So again, just a quick little policy overview of kind of what we're looking at, and the deadlines we're looking at as far as the designation process goes. So I'll pass it to Rick now for talking more about exceptional events.
Thanks, Evan. That's good background for us, and why we're really here today, this change in the NAAQS. So I'll spend just a few minutes talking about the exceptional events, give a broad overview, and then the folks from Georgia are going to really delve into more of the details and the specific work they're doing. So I always like to start out with this slide that shows that EPA recognizes the importance of prescribed fire. It's used to mimic natural processes and maintaining fire adapted ecosystems and reducing the risk of catastrophic wildfires. And this is a quote from the exceptional events rule proposal in 2015. In 2023, EPA joined into a memorandum of understanding between the Forest Service, DOI, and CDC and EPA. And we kind of reiterated our commitment to recognize the importance of prescribed fire. Just wanted to highlight that as well. Of course, as Evan mentioned, at EPA, our mission is to protect human health and the environment. So we all know prescribed fire produces smoke, and has air quality impacts and human health impacts. And so that's why we're involved, and our main role here is to ensure that emissions from prescribed fire are minimized as much as possible, to limit the air quality impacts. So the exceptional events rule, what it is, it's in our statute, it's in the Clean Air Act, as you see in section 319 there. It's also in our Code of Federal Regulations. And what it is it provides an avenue for air quality monitoring data to be excluded from regulatory decisions, such as the non-attainment designations that Evan just spoke about. So it provides a regulatory mechanism for excluding that data, assuming that you can meet all of the criteria. Fire qualifies for an exceptional event. Both wildfires and prescribed fires can qualify, and I'll talk about some more of the details in a minute, but this slide shows the key criteria in the law, in the Clean Air Act. An exceptional event is an event that affects air quality, is not reasonably controllable or preventable, is caused by human activity that's unlikely to recur at a particular location, or is a natural event, and is determined by EPA to be an exceptional event. So it has to be approved by EPA. So that's kind of the basic guidance. We have our exceptional events rule from 2016 clearly lays out that prescribed fire can qualify as an exceptional event. In 2019, we issued a guidance document that provides more details, and there's a link there. And then just this past January, we collaborated with the state of California to produce an example prescribed fire exceptional event demonstration, because none had been done under the 2016 rule up until that time. So there's a link there for that information. And just really quickly, as I mentioned, there's a lot of information that needs to be included in a demonstration. And this slide summarizes that information. I'm not going to go through all the details here for the sake of time, but some of the key criteria are the things that I just referenced on the previous slide that are laid out in the law itself. There's also requirements for public comment process and a mitigation requirements, which include public notification, and that really gets at the protecting the public, or notifying the public and allowing them to protect themselves if air quality is going to be degraded and be at levels that are unhealthy. So one of the key criteria to show an exceptional event for a prescribed fire is that you need to either demonstrate that the fire was done under a adopted and state certified smoke management program, which has certain criteria in it, or that the fire was done following basic smoke management practices. And this slide summarizes what those practices are. And mainly they're getting at minimizing the air pollutant emissions from the fire and the impacts on air quality. And so there's links here that you can follow up, including a link to a fact sheet on the Southern Fire Exchange page. And so there's some additional links here, and I'm sure I'm out of time, and we'll have questions at the end. So thanks for your attention.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick and Evan. We appreciate that overview, and hopefully that'll set the stage for what's to come now. Because next we have up Jim Boylan, who's with Georgia EPD. Georgia has been kind of at the epicenter, I guess you could say, of some of this work. They had a tabletop exercise earlier this year where they went into depth in a lot of this, and Georgia is going to be the hardest hit state in the Southeast, if not the country, in terms of the number of exceptional events that are going to be submitting. So we have some folks here from Georgia to talk about what they've been doing in their state, since they've been doing so much work in this area already. So Jim, if you want to go ahead and take your self off of mute and your camera, and you should have the ability to share your slides. So we'll turn it over to you now. And just a reminder for folks, and They just mentioned it, but we will be taking questions at the end. So use that Q&A function. I see there's a couple of good questions in there already, and you can use that upvote feature if you see a question that you also have a similar question. Otherwise, you can enter in other questions as well. All right, thanks, Jim. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and my screen is on full screen. Is that correct?
Yes, everything looks great.
All right, great. I'm Jim Boylan with Georgia EPD, I'm Chief of the Air Branch, and I'll be talking about the work we're doing here in Georgia on PM NAAQS and exceptional events. And to build off what Evan and Rick talked about, you know, once the new PM standard was lowered, the first clock that was ticking was designations. So the state submits our recommendation 1 year after promulgation of the NAAQS. So that's February 7th. That will be based on the most recent 3 years of data that's available, which is at this point in time, 2021 to 2023. So a 3-year design value. And then a year after that, EPA will do the final designations by February 6th of 2026. And that will be based on the most recent 3 years of data, which in that case will be 2022 to 2024. So 2021 will drop off and 2024 will be added. And, you know, nobody knows what 2024 will look like because we're only halfway through the year. There's 5 factors for designations. And the point of this is to identify areas that are violating the NAAQS as well as nearby areas with emissions that contribute to a violation of the NAAQS. So the 5 factors include air quality data, which is by far the most important of the 5 factors. Again, 2021 to 2023 data, and I'll be sharing a lot of data, information on the data in Georgia to talk about that category. And then the second most important one would be the emissions and emissions related data. So it's not only the counties that have the violating monitors, but also nearby counties that have emissions that are contributing to the violation. And then meteorology, geography, and judicial boundaries. So non-attainment areas, again, Evan did talk about non-attainment areas. What goes in, you know, if an area is designated non-attainment, Georgia EPD will have to write a state implementation plan that includes a lot of stuff. Probably one of the most important things in there is a control strategy that will bring the area from a non-attainment status back into attainment. And I have a couple of slides to talk about, you know, what a potential control strategy might look like. These are due 18 months after the effective date of designations. There's also, you know, impacts on permitting for industrial stationary sources. There's RAC and RACM, reasonably achievable control measures and technologies for existing sources. There's lowest achievable emission rates for new sources, which basically means the best available control, regardless of cost, and emission offsets, which means in order to increase emissions from one facility, you have to reduce emissions from another facility. And so it becomes much harder to get new projects permitted in the non-attainment area. Then there's impacts on transportation and general conformity, which has to do with federally funded projects for transportation, and then general conformity is all other projects. And we have to jump through a bunch of hoops to show that those projects do not interfere with attainment and maintenance of the NAAQS. So to focus on the control strategy part of the SIP, this is an example from many, many years ago when the Atlanta area was non-attainment for the 1-hour ozone standard. And part of our control strategy for the ozone standard way back when was a summer burn ban, which had restrictions on prescribed burning in a number of counties around the Atlanta area. It also had additional restrictions on burning, such as burning of leaves and land clearing. In total, 54 counties were impacted. So one thing to note from this was 13 counties were designated non-attainment in Atlanta. However, many more than 13 counties actually got controls applied to them through this, you know, and the reason is, you know, the smoke and smoke emissions can transport long distances and affect air quality far away. And so this is kind of an example from many years ago for ozone, where we actually did a flat out ban on prescribed burning in the green counties from May 1st to September 30th. Hopefully we don't have to do any bans of prescribed burning. Another option is, and Ken's going to talk more about this in his presentation, was an Albany pilot project where Georgia Forestry Commission worked directly with private landowners in the Albany area to reduce the impact of smoke from prescribed fires. It included 8 counties. And the way it worked was, if the forecasted transport winds were less than 5 miles per hour, GFC would not issue permits in those 8 counties. If it was 6 to 7 miles per hour, they would limit the size of the burns to 200 acres, and all fire operations would have to be completed by 2 p.m. And if it was 8 miles per hour or more, it was business as usual, and they would issue their permits. So, this program's been in place for, I think, a couple of years now, and they've been evaluating it and tweaking the program, and they're looking at some adjustments that Ken can talk about. But, this is an example where, it would be a control strategy to help reduce some of the impacts of smoke in the non-attainment area, but it would not eliminate prescribed burning. So this is just an example of what a strategy could look like in a non-attainment area. But the bottom line is, nobody wants a non-attainment area. The landowners don't want that. GFC doesn't want it. EPD doesn't want it. EPA doesn't want it. Nobody wants a non-attainment area. So, we're going to hopefully do whatever we can to get areas designated attainment. So, like I said, designations are based mostly on the monitoring data. We have a very robust monitoring network across the state of Georgia. This map shows the different types of monitors. The green circles are PM continuous monitors, the federal FEM network, federal equivalency method monitors. These are the instantaneous monitors where you get an instantaneous reading. It's hourly values, and it's very low cost. It's not expensive because you don't have lab samples to take care of. So we have a number of those. Those are in the green circles. We also have a number of the red triangles. Those are the federal reference method monitors. Those are the gold standard. This is the way PM has been measured for the last 25 years. There's a lot of work involved with this. You basically have to weigh a filter in the lab, bring it to the site, collect 24 hours of sample, go and pick up the filter, ship the filter, weigh the filter, and get the results 2 to 3 months later. And when you get the results, it's only a single value for the 24-hour period. You don't get hour by hour information. The cost is much, much higher than the FEM measurements. So FEMs have a lot of advantages. They're instantaneous, hourly, and inexpensive. And as you can see, we have many co-located monitors across the state. And one of the issues that's been raised is that the FEM, although it has lots of advantages, the big disadvantage is that it reads about 20% higher than the FRM. And that's a big deal when the standard's lowered from 12 down to 9. 20% high bias is a big deal. EPA came up with a fix. It didn't really completely fix the problem. It reduced the bias from 20% down to about 10%. So the EPA fix really still is not a good fix. EPD has actually come up with a much better fix and has submitted it to EPA, but EPA has not incorporated that. So we're stuck with the EPA fix, and that's what we're going to go with for now. But it does still have a 10% high bias. And so that needs to be accounted for when we start looking at our design values. So this is the map of Georgia, the 2021 to 2023 design values. This is based on the uncorrected data. So the FEM data has no correction applied to it. So this is where we started with the design values. Basically, the entire state of Georgia is above 9.0 based on the uncorrected FEM data. And if you recall, there's a mix of monitors. Some are FRM, some are FEM. Typically, if there's an FRM, that takes precedent over the FEM data. So when we apply the correction, some areas will not be affected and some areas will be very much affected. So we did apply the EPA correction factors and the numbers look a little better. You can see that some areas went from red to yellow and green, but we are still left with 6 areas that are above 9.0. We have Augusta, Sandersville, Columbus, we have Columbus, Macon, Atlanta, and Chattanooga. That are all above 9. Albany is right at 9.0. 9.0 is attaining the standard. It's meeting the standard. So this is what we have to work with here. We have 6 areas above the standard, and the only way the only tool in our toolbox to get them from above 9, say from 9.8 or 10.0 down to 9.0, is to do exceptional events. And when we do exceptional event demonstrations, submit it to EPA, and they approve that, that data is then removed from the annual average used in the design value calculations. So we've identified days that we need to do for exceptional events. And this is the number of days for each of these areas that if we do an exceptional event demonstration for the days that have been identified and EPA approves them, it would bring the area from above 9.0 down to exactly 9.0. So in total, there's 221 exceptional events. You know, Augusta, we need to do 41, Sandersville, 66. Atlanta's only 2, and that one's kind of strange in that the high monitor is a roadside monitor. It doesn't, and we're kind of dealing with that separately and different. But even down here in Columbus, actually what you can see here is the Phoenix City monitor is at 9.5. The Columbus monitor is at 10. So we have to do exceptional events on both sides. So we're working very closely with Alabama to do these demonstrations, 18 in Phoenix City and 10 in Columbus, 74 up in the Chattanooga area. So this is a huge undertaking. You know, the number of exceptional events, like Rick said, only one has ever been submitted and approved by EPA so far, and we've got 221 to get done by February. So this is a huge lift for us. So what goes into an exceptional event demonstration? We've, Rick talked about this, the conceptual model, the clear causal relationship. I'll give an example of that. Human activity unlikely to recur. We can use the natural fire return interval map, and I'll show that. Not reasonably controllable, preventable. Rick mentioned that a certified smoke management program covers that, and then public comments. So we collect information from Georgia Forestry Commission on permits. This is an example for February 14th. You know, we get the county, the acreage, the type, the purpose of the burn and the location, and then we can use this information in our clear causal relationship. And we're able to generate a map like this. In fact, we've generated hundreds of maps that look just like this, where we can actually look at the impact of the fires on the monitor. So what we have here is the monitor. This is Savannah, an example, 33.9. This is Fort Stewart right here in the blue. And you can see the fires. The red fires are from satellite detected fires. The Georgia Forestry Commission fires are in the green and the purple circles. The size of the circle is related to the number of acres that were permitted. The green circles are silviculture, the purple are non-silviculture. And then we also have the HMS smoke plumes, which is a NOAA product that actually shows smoke plumes. And you can actually see the gray smoke plume here coming from Fort Stewart. And then we also have the high split back trajectories, which are modeled back trajectories to look where the parcels of air from the monitor passed over, and then we can look and see if they passed over prescribed fires. So in this case, you know, to me, it's very obvious that these fires, you know, either fires from the base or some of these fires over here that were issued permits are in the back trajectory leading to the high value, showing the clear causal relationship between the prescribed fires and the high value at the monitor, allowing it to be removed through exceptional events. So like I said, we've automated this and we've actually generated hundreds of these that we are currently going through one by one analyzing. Fire return interval map, that was one of the things that we needed, one of the elements of this. This was provided by Hewitt, and you know, we're able to zoom in on this. We have it in GIS, so we can zoom into the areas that we're looking at. Also, the smoke management program. So Georgia does have a certified smoke management program. GFC, Georgia Forestry Commission, issues burn permits. They restrict burning on poor dispersion days or on days when the wind is blowing towards sensitive locations, or poor air quality days, either forecasted air quality days. So if it's forecasted code orange or code red, they will not issue permits. If there's high measurements the morning of, they'll stop issuing permits and things like that. One note, the military bases are not required to get burn permits, but GFC has been working with them and they are doing notifications now. So future demonstrations, the GFC would like to increase the acreage burned across the state. They're currently doing about 1.5 million acres per year, and they would like to increase that. Ken will probably talk about that. But one of the issues with that is as we increase the number of burns, we're going to have to increase or continue to do exceptional events. It's not just a one-time thing. It's not just, we're going to do 221 this year and we're done. We're going to have to do probably another 100 next year for to cover the 2024 data. And then we'll have to do another 100 to cover the 2026 data and 27 data, and basically do this forever. We have to do exceptional events, hundreds of them every year, to get the data removed. So if the area's designate attainment, it stays in attainment. So that's a lot of work. EPD has been working with EPA Region 4 and Georgia Forestry Commission to develop an exceptional event template for prescribed fires in the Southeast. And that's coming along nicely. And we're hoping to, as Johnny Sabo said, we're hoping to streamline the process to minimize the amount of information that needs to go in there for approval. The final thing I'll talk about is PSD background adjustments. So, the new PM NAAQS can have a huge economic impact on new industry coming into states, in this case, Georgia. Here's an example of the FEM bias adjustment. So this is, for example, Sandersville's at 10.0. We're able to use exceptional events to get the Sandersville monitor from 10.0 down to 9.0 using exceptional events. However, if a new industry wanted to come into the area, there's no headroom between the background value and the standard for the new industry. So the new industry wouldn't be able to pass the modeling and get an air permit to be able to build. What is really needed is some headroom between the background value and the standard. So we're looking at removing additional days through atypical activity process, which is different than exceptional events, although it's similar. The hurdle is much lower, and it does not need EPA approval. It needs Georgia EPD approval. So we're actually looking at removing additional days for the purpose of PSD background. So in this case, going from 9.0, say, down to 7.0, which would give enough headroom that a new industry could still come into an area and build. So the number of atypical activities that we're looking to do for PSD background is over 1,000. Like I said, there's a lot more of these. We're looking at this for all the monitors, but the bar for approval is much lower because it's really an internal demonstration to EPD and not needing EPA formal approval, although we definitely will share our results with the EPA to get their feedback. And then my final slide is next steps. We're working on streamlining the development of our exceptional event and atypical activity demonstrations, working with our neighboring states. For multi-state designation recommendations, we're working with Alabama, Tennessee, and South Carolina. And then we're working on to better understand how fires at military bases will be treated under the exceptional event rule, noting that military bases are not required to get a permit, and the state do not have any regulatory authority to restrict burning at DoD facilities. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. That was a really great overview from Georgia. So now everybody can see why. I think we had Georgia as our highlighted state here today. So we're going to continue with the Georgia theme now. And up next is Ken Parker. Ken, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on, and I'll pass it over to you.
All right. So Ken Parker, Georgia Forestry Commission. I'm the wildland fire specialist. And just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we're dealing with. Again, you heard Jim. And so just to give you an idea, as we're trying to increase burning, 1.5 is, a little over, that's what we hit this year. We need to do a lot more than that. We have a lot more forested land in Georgia that needs to be burned. And so as we're trying to, as all of you are trying to increase your burning, you're more likely to run into incidents. And, you already saw how many issues how many exceedance reports that Jim was going to have to do. And if we continue to do burning, continue to increase burning in the state of Georgia, then, we have the potential to affect more monitors. So we have to come up with a way to allow our burners, allow our land managers to continue to do burning, but at the same time, protect the public. So, our burning in Georgia, we've been right around that 1.4, 1.5 million acres. We've been floating right around there. We had a downturn from, 17 through 20, a lot of rain, then drought, then COVID. But our numbers are coming back up. They're getting to where I'd like to see them. I'd like to see that continued increase. But again, as we continue to increase, as you go to increase your burning in your area, the more likely you are to have impacts to these monitors and the population centers. So this is just one day in Georgia, and this was not even our busiest day this year. This is 37,000 acres in Georgia, 967 permits. The busiest week was 167,000 acres in 1 week. So you can imagine just the amount of smoke that was produced for all those burns. And our single busiest day this year was 48,000 acres in a single day. So a lot of burning, a lot of smoke that we're having to manage here in Georgia, especially with us wanting to increase burning. This is the satellite detected fires for a 2-week period. And it kind of shows you that hot spot in Southwest Georgia and kind of the reason why that we picked the Albany location to work on a pilot project, because if it could work there with all the burning that's going on, then we felt like it could work anywhere in the state. Here's just another way of looking at those locations. This was before the lowering of the NAAQS, and you see that cluster over there of all those locations that are above the 9. So this is kind of what triggered a lot of this, a lot of what kind of opened our eyes that what we could potentially lose the freedom we have to burn in Georgia, and so those restrictions that potentially come with a SIP. So we felt like we needed to start doing something, so we came up with an Albany pilot project, as Jim said. So what we've done is that's 2 years of data. And yes, we reduced some of the exceedance days, but we did not reduce the overall annual standard. So now what we're doing is, besides just looking at transport winds, we're looking at dispersion index, we're looking at the NAAQS the AQI readings or the NAAQS is that morning. We're looking at incorporating that, and we're looking at bringing those into our decision-making process, directional impacts, so that we're more focusing on the upwind from the population centers and allowing the burners downwind to continue to burn. Our smoke management plan, we've rewritten that. It's in for review right now. Some of the leadership are looking at that, trying to, make sure that our smoke management plan supports what we're trying to do and supports, the EE. We've also, the certification course, we've really put a focus on smoke management in that course. We've really focusing on the air quality, trying to explain to the certified burn, the individuals that are going to become certified, we're really trying to emphasize the importance of smoke management and why they need to take it seriously and pay attention to what they are doing. We've also started looking at some technology. There is the drone Amplified has their drone system, and we've started using that. And one of the benefits is the early start, early finish. Get the smoke up, get it out. No, it may not be the tool for every landowner, but for our agencies, state, federal partners, NGOs, this may be a tool that you can look into to get your burning done, get it completed earlier, to allow that smoke to get out of there, because we all understand that that is what it's about. We've got to manage the smoke. So, what can you do? what can you do? What can your agency do? What can, to support the EE? A good permitting or tracking system that includes lat and long. EPD has to have the location of the burn. They need to know where that's at. Then they need to know the total acres being burned. They need to have that information. What type of burn? Because only silvicultural burns can be used in the EE. So land clearing, agricultural, those are all thrown out. If they cause a exceedance, then there is no way that an EE can be written for those. The EE is only for silvicultural burns. So they need to know in your permitting system or your tracking system what type of burn it is. Then some form of smoke management consideration. For Georgia, we use V-smoke, and we're looking at that. What are those impacts? So what are those downrange impacts? Using the weather for the day, put into the V-smoke, and that's what we're using. You also need some type of public notification. There has to be a part of the EE is public notification. So what we've done here in Georgia is we have a public viewer. Basically, a landowner, a resident of Georgia can click on that. They can see where the burns are occurring in the state, in their area. We're getting ready to add the AQI readings, the air quality readings for, code orange, code red. We're looking at adding a wind directional component to that so that a landowner can look and say, all right, this burn is upwind of me. Maybe I need to consider XYZ. But it's just a communication piece that we're putting together so that we can meet the EE. Then every state should have state forestry or EPD. You should be working together. The only way that Georgia's gotten to where we are is the working relationship we have between our state agencies. Great support. The information that we need to get from them, they need to get from us is a two-way street. And we're freely sharing that with them because, again, Jim and his crew are actively trying to protect prescribed fire by doing these EEs. I mean, you saw how many he's having to do. That's a lot of workload on his staff. And without that, if the SIP has to be created, then we could lose some potential for prescribed fire. And that's not what we want to do. We're wanting to increase prescribed fire. So having that working relationship, having a strong working relationship is very important. And then a strong smoke management plan, signed by the state forestry and EPD at a minimum. We're looking at bringing in a signature on that for Prescribed Fire Council this year, is having them sign off on this also. Since they're the ones, the councils speaking to our prescribed burners across the state, having them sign off on it. But at least at a minimum, having state forestry and EPD sign an MOU smoke management plan. So, having those things at a minimum will help a state forestry agency support their EPDs in the exceptional events. So that's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Ken. That was a really nice overview once again to hear from the other side of things, the ones putting the smoke on the ground. So next we'll transition into our Department of Defense Wildland Fire Program. We have Paul Catlett on the line, who's also the co-chair of this working group. So Paul, I will pass it off to you. Thank you.
Okay. Weird. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Catlett. I work for Texas A&M, but specifically for DoD for Ann Jewell, who also sits on the newly subgroup that's on, and came on with Ann in October of last year. I've spent the last 30 years at Camp Lanning, a National Guard installation in Northeast Florida, putting a lot of fire on the ground, lots of work there. So my talk obviously will have a Southeast flavor to it, but so does SERPPAS. Quickly, that's kind of the topics I'll be covering. Obviously, the kind of the question is why is DoD kind of interested in all of this, and the why is DoD manages 27 million acres across the U.S. Our missions on the installations pretty much drive our land management objectives and goals. We've got over 500 installations. Many of them have a prescribed fire program, or at least a fire emergency services program. There's diverse landscapes and resilient ecosystem. We've got over 500 threatened and endangered species, 55 endemic to the installations themselves. So P&E plays a big role in our management and how the soldiers will actually train on the landscape. Again, kind of circling back to the Southeast, many of the T&E species in the Southeast require fire. It's something that's just a part of the landscape, as most all of you all know. Specifically for us, I mean, it's red-cockaded woodpeckers, gopher tortoises, indigo snakes. All of those need frequent fire put on the installation. So that's kind of the a push that the installations have is put fire on the ground for these species. Some of the efforts that we've got going on, obviously, changing climate conditions. Climate change is a big deal. It's something that the installations and the DoD is getting their arms around, and it's a security issue and a management challenge for us. I can speak for Blanding, and it's more anecdotal than anything else, but I think one of the previous speakers kind of touched on it. The climate change where it's hurting at least Blanding, where I came from, was a change in some of our burn authorization. Blanding is a little different than a lot of the DoD installations. We were actually state-owned. Most of our money was federal funds to support the federal mission, but it was actually state land. So we had to get authorizations from the state and follow all the state laws for gopher tortoises and things like that. Our prescribed fire program at times was hampered because of the need to put fire on the ground and the smoke issues and smoke impacts that may happen. So we've kind of seen that creep up over the last 5 to 10 years, more times that we're not given authorization when we need to. And a lot of it is growing season, because that's kind of where the red-cockaded woodpecker, indigo snakes, and everything are that's the adapted fire regime. So wildfire risk is also an installation risk to the mission. There's lots of pyrotechnics, lots of things that are used, and they do start wildfire. And again, that's some of the we put beneficial fire on the ground to support the P&E, but we also put it on there to support the soldiers as well. And I'll touch on that in just a minute. So to kind of put it in perspective, how much and DoD has their hands in fire. Roughly, we're looking at about 650,000 acres annually of prescribed fire. A lot of that is in the Southeast. We have about 350,000 acres of wildfire. 80% of those are due to installation or due to training, either training aids, pyrotechnics, things like that the military uses, but they are due to training. At Blanding, it was closer to 90-95% of our wildfires were military set in one form or fashion. Acreage has always stayed pretty low because we manage the pyrotechnics and the use of them and where they were going to be used. And most of the other installations do the same thing, but still, we are going to have fires just due to training. So our prevention, obviously, the more fire we put on the ground, it prevents a lot of the catastrophic fires. And we may still have higher numbers of fires, but a lot lower catastrophic fires. Like I mentioned before, it supports ecosystem restoration. And the management goals for that. But at the end, we are there to support the military and the military training. That is our primary goal. We have a lot of other things we got to manage, T&E and fuels and things like that. But you know, all of that supports that apex, which is military training. And it's the going back to the pyrotechnic use and the realistic training. You know, they use a lot of simulators, but allowing soldiers to train realistically with trip flares, star clusters, smoke grenades, tracers, you know, things like that. That's all realistic training. The more we can't put fire on the ground and the higher the fuel loads, we really have to start pulling back on that. And to me, that impacts the mission and the realistic training. So the DoD, obviously, we are supporting the environmental compliance. We have environmental compliance programs at every installation, and you know, that whether it be for cleanup or for air quality, all of those, there are people at the installation that support that. And just from the Army standpoint, you know, we had 131 installations surveyed, and 87%, you know, coordinate their fire programs through the Clean Air Act regulations. So for Florida, it was through the Florida Forest Service, and we did everything through them. One of the things that is our responsibility, or one of the things that we're trying to push is, you know, to get the installations to open up those communications and those cooperations with their state regulators and things like that. There's things that we can improve, and that's, as these programs move forward, it will open up opportunities for installations, you know, to help in these the exceptional events rule and things like that. So this is our wildland fire program development. We are in the middle. To kind of back up a little bit, wildland fire, while it's not new to installations, wildland fire has been on the installations for decades. At the DoD level, it's fairly new. We're trying to pull it all together now and get everybody on the same page. And part of that is through the cohesive strategies, standardizing our training and our personnel qualifications, firefighter qualifications, things like that, and getting this cross-service coordination. So as well as our internal external partner coordination. So those are the things, at least at our level, that we're trying to standardize across the services. As we move closer to the exceptional events rule, I mean, there are going to be potentially some conflicting objectives, you know, as there's not necessarily a push to reduce prescribed fire, but as things come up and they may reduce prescribed fire, installations are also pushed for recovery of endangered species. In the Southeast, it was red-cockaded woodpeckers. You know, there's a lot of installations. Blanding was one of them, Eglin, Fort Stewart, Moore, Liberty, you know, that have a lot of RCWs on the landscape. They've now met recovery, and there's other species coming up where we want to do the same thing, get them to recovery where they're not an issue for the training lands, the realistic training that happens on the training land. So, and we will be keeping an eye on how this affects prescribed fire, because it does can affect our ability to recover species, and then ultimately through the Endangered Species Act could impact training. So that's the kind of the balance that we have to do to manage for these training land, which is our primary mission. So I think I've moved through it pretty quickly. Jen, I think I can kick it back over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, great overview. As you just heard, the military does a lot of prescribed burning, so it's a very important part to this overall conversation. We're going to pass it off to Shan now, but I did want to mention for a reminder for folks, go ahead and put your questions in, and then Rick and Jim, I see some questions in there that I think you might be able to help to answer, since we probably won't have time to get to all the questions at the end. Folks want to start, if the presenters want to start answering some of the questions in the chat, go ahead. And just a reminder for everybody to keep putting your questions in there, and we'll try to get as many answered as possible here. So passing it off to Shan Kamek, another one of our members of our SERPPAS Prescribed Fire Working Group for many years, and just doing great work in Georgia, keeping all of this moving along. We heard a lot about the challenges now and what the new statutes kind of mean, but what to do about it. So Shan has lots of great ideas on how to mitigate some of that and talk about what she's been doing in Georgia. So I will pass it off to you, Shan.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks to all our speakers for a great background on this issue. So now this is when the rubber meets the road. What can SERPPAS, what can everybody in this meeting do to help protect prescribed burning? So all of us here, I know, agree that fire is a natural process from the mountains to the sea. We also know that it's going to prevent that buildup of vegetation and prevent catastrophic wildfires. But how much does the public actually understand that? I think they get the whole like burning up the trees, burning up the wildlife, but do they understand that link with prescribed fires actually making our air healthier because it's preventing those catastrophic wildfires? So our one message, many voices, I like to add this little addendum here that fire is our absolutely most critical tool in managing wildlife, creating resilient ecosystems, and promoting clean air. And that's what we really need you guys to help get the message out of, like, we need fire to keep our air cleaner. So the Georgia tabletop that we had at the Jones Center back in January, we came up with the path for exceptional events as the path to protect prescribed burning. As Rick mentioned, I was leading the area and state planning work group, and out of that, we've come up with a lot of different things, like a survey to all the air quality directors and fire chiefs, just to see where the Southeast is on how many exceptional events, demonstrations do you have? Are you talking with your air people? Are you talking to your state wildlife action plan coordinators? Because what Rick showed is the EPA criteria for an exceptional events demonstration for prescribed fire. They need some very, very specific things. And some of these things need to be in a plan. Now in Georgia, 93% privately owned. You saw that map that Ken showed of just like hundreds of fires happening in any given good burning day. Do those people have a plan? Not really. So the state wildlife action plan can serve as that plan to meet those criteria for exceptional events. Now, Georgia is in the middle of updating our 2025. I know a lot of other states are updating theirs right now. So I've highlighted the things here that I think the state wildlife action plan can address. And basically, that's things like the narrative conceptual model. If you can list the burn objectives in your SWAP or your forest action plan, tie those back to the burn permits, you're meeting that criteria. That part about not reasonably controllable or preventable, that's where you can talk about foregone benefits for not burning, like forest resiliency, forest health, mitigation of wildfire. And then the fire return interval can help address the thing about the human activity unlikely to recur. So what you guys can do is engage with your state wildlife action plan, SWAP, and forest action plan, FAP, coordinators to see if they can get this kind of stuff into their plans. Now, SWAPs are good for 10 years. So even if you don't think you might have a problem with the exceptional events demonstration this year, is there a possibility that you might have a problem down the road? So get it into the SWAP now. Here are some of the maps that you can do. And then some of the text that you can add. Like Ken mentioned, and Rick and Jim, you can link these with your burn permits with their fire return interval. And in Georgia, we've got to make this really, really automated because of the hundreds we need to write. So this means that you have a robust tracking system, right? Ken already mentioned this. So a centralized system where you can get data. Does your state have one of these? Latin longs, so you know where those fires are, and do some smoke management planning. We do that when we get a permit in Georgia, which is satisfying one of those criteria. Here is the Guyette map for Georgia. We have the data for the whole Southeast. Reach out to us if you'd like to include this in any of your plans and make it vectorized so that you can overlay burn permits on it. Other maps that we've made include the wildfire risk mitigation. Georgia leads the country in forestry. So all these places, if we have prescribed burning, are protecting our forest resources. And then the Southern Group of State Forests have this map about the WUI and protecting urban centers. So those are in our SWAP as well. And then there's some more criteria about basic smoke managed practices. There's the smoke management plan that you can get certified, and then there's best smoke management practices. And this is also where communication and public notification comes in. And I think this is something that we all really, really need to work on. So first of all, does your state have a basic smoke management plan? Is it certified? If not, help them write it, help them adopt it, make it strong. Communication with the public. There's a lot of information out there about health impacts on smoke and fire, but I think the EPA is really looking for a more targeted thing, like targeted alerts. Forest Service is really good about that. They're like, hey guys, we're going to be burning the Chattahoochee National Forest. Here's where we're going to be burning. Just heads up. So we need to be thinking about more of that. And we are creating a new public outreach thing with this one message, many voices. We're going to add, when there's smoke in the air, here's what you can do to protect yourself and your family. And it's really important for all agencies to get on board to share this unified message. We're going to point people to the Air Now app and website. This is where you can see current air quality in the area and where the fires are. It even shows you smoke trajectories. And one thing that would be really helpful, and we're working on here in Georgia, is to get this information out through local health departments, because they're the ones that are really going to meet those at-risk populations, right? People that have these kind of conditions might not be interested in fire and looking on or part of our social media. So those local health departments can be a key piece. But number one is wildland firelighters have to know how to pick the right day, manage their smoke, and be smoke savvy. So training in understanding smoke management and fire management, knowing what your smoke sensitive targets are, but also more than that, thinking of that airshed, the concept of an airshed, and that we're all sharing that. There might be a great day for burning, but it's not a great day for smoke, because the previous days have been a big day for burning and there's a lot of smoke just hanging out in the airshed. So if you're denied a permit on the day, you need to understand why that happened. In Georgia, Ken mentioned this wildfire public viewer, so you can see where other people are burning in the area. And then you got to use all the tools in your toolbox. So if you're doing a small, simple fire, use V-Smoke or the simple smoke screening tool. Georgia DNR actually developed this really cool little nifty thing that's current winds and conservation lands and the air quality monitors or the population density. So you can quickly see like, hey, I'm burning on this WMA south of Albany, and we've got south winds taking it straight into Albany. Not a good day to burn, just another tool in the toolbox. And then if you're doing higher level, really big burns, use things like PB burn or high split trajectories. There's a lot of great resources out there. Southern Fire Exchange is an excellent place to go to find more information on basic smoke management practices. And obviously training, your certification class that might be in your state is going to talk about it. Extension came out with this great guidebook on smoke management, and Tall Timbers is about to drop this really cool 2-hour virtual course on smoke management. And then the prescribed fire councils in your state are a really good place to share information, get people up on the latest research and strategies, lessons learned, ramp up your websites, make sure all of these resources are available to the practitioners. Another great vehicle for sharing information is PBAs, prescribed burn associations. Landowners can get free help, but also they're getting great info. There's all kinds of really cool workshops that happen, and this is a really great place to teach people how to burn well and use smoke management techniques. And then Ken also mentioned these ignition strategies. What can you do to burn hot and fast to lift your smoke in the middle of the day when it's going to get up and out? Pyro shots are super handy. If you got an extra 100K laying around, these drones are amazing, and they are really, really great tool to finesse your fire, get the fire done really, really fast, and get that smoke up and out. And I saw Mary mentioned in the chat about expanding the burn windows. Get outside your comfort zone and outside your normal, regular routine of burning. If we can spread fires throughout the whole year, we're actually spreading the smoke out throughout the year. And remember, Burner Bob says pyrodiversity enkindles biodiversity. So by changing up your scale and intensity, seasonality, or your timing of your burn, you're actually increasing wildlife diversity and you're spreading that smoke out. So I entreat all y'all, these great minds in this room, to advocate for prescribed burning. Do what you can in your sector to help protect this tool so that we can manage wildlife diversity, build more resilient ecosystems, and promote cleaner air. Thank you.
Thanks, Shan. Hopefully you all were very inspired by Shan's talk. And like she said, you know, there's even if you all are on the line, not land managers yourselves, there's something in there. I think that pretty much all of the agencies on the line today, or folks on the line today, could assist with in terms of the exceptional events demonstrations and helping to keep prescribed fire on the land. We all want to be good neighbors and help protect the air, like Shan said. So I am going to drop a link in the chat here in a second for, she created a document that was kind of these broad strokes ideas for Georgia, ideas to help with the exceptional events demonstration process. So even if your state isn't anticipating doing any now, next year might be a different story. So it's better to be prepared in case your state does have to do one. So I turned it into a working document. So feel free to add your thoughts, additions, comments on the document that's there so we can create a regional resource for everybody. And then once we get everybody's thoughts in here, we can we'll see what that turns into, but maybe we'll be able to share that out with others, you know, as some ideas for ways that folks can help with this effort. So next, I want to ask all of our working group leads to turn your cameras on, please. And we're going to start with Gary Wood with the Southeast Cohesive Strategy. And this next little portion will probably take us to the end of the call. So I do want to mention, if you have questions that you have, go ahead and throw them in the chat. And I see one question in there right now, are the presentations that they can be shared. And so David has let me know that all of the presentations and any other attachments and links to things, those will all be shared out afterwards along with this meeting recording. I don't know, David, if that will be on the website, or if you want to let people know where they can find that, you can throw that in the chat. But yes, so all of this will be available for sure. So we're going to pass it off to our working group leads. We thought it might be interesting for those of you who aren't part of our prescribed fire working group to just hear from the other working group leads as to how this topic is of interest to their respective working groups, and also from Gary as the Southeast Cohesive Strategy Coordinator for the Southeast to give a brief overview about how this connects with this cohesive strategy as well. So go ahead, Gary.
Okay, thank you, Jen, and I'll be very brief so we can hopefully move on to everybody else. But we know that wildfire is increasing across the country. The Southeast continues to have the majority of ignitions annually of any region across the country. But at the same time, we know that prescribed fire is the oldest and cheapest fire management and forest management tool that we've got available to us. And we are seeing where we're getting some real good fire stops from wildfires that could potentially do damage due to fuel treatments that have been done by prescribed fire. The cohesive strategy is a national framework for how to address those wildland fires that occur, built around three goals. It's creating and maintaining resilient landscapes, and then creating fire adapted communities where we can collaboratively learn to live with wildland fire, because it's not a matter of if a wildfire occurs, but it's going to be where and when and how destructive. and at the same time, effective, safe wildfire response. The Southeast itself is a very fragmented landscape. It's a fire dependent landscape that we have, and it's becoming more fragmented all the time. And so, we've got to be able to maintain and achieve healthy forests, which are resilient forests, and use of fire on those fragmented landscapes is very important. You saw the fire return intervals. We really need to be doing about 7 times the prescribed fire that we are now. So how do we do more burning in a more fragmented landscape that's getting more fragmented all the time with additional restrictions that are imposed upon us? Because the most important thing at the end of the day is that whatever we do, we minimize the impact to public health. And so one of the things that we're doing, we've been working with Jen and her group with the SERPPAS Prescribed Fire Work Group. We're also a member of the new group that Johnny is helping lead that he talked about early on in the presentation. And we're looking at how we can better educate folks across the region, particularly with our states that may not have the issues or think they have the issues that Georgia has now. And, we know that we're mostly private land. We got a large military footprint in our region, which is why it's so important to partner, with SERPPAS and other agencies, because moving forward, the partnerships, like this that we can build are going to be crucial to being able to be successful, to be able to put fire on those fire dependent ecosystems and minimize that impact to public health. And so we look forward to working with everyone and being able to try to help elevate some of the concerns as well as pass information back and forth down. And I can do that through the participation with the Wildland Fire Leadership Council, which Ann and Department of Defense are principals on as well. And just get good information flow so that everybody kind of sings off of the same sheet of the hymn book, as we say here in the South, and can be successful in what we do to minimize that public health impact, but also get the fire that we need on those ecosystems that need them. And I'll pass it off, Jen.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you hanging on for that. And hopefully this work will contribute to the cohesive strategy as well. So now we're going to let all of our working group leads on the line. Go ahead and turn your cameras on and unmute yourselves, and we'll go in the order of Rob, Becky, and then Bruce. And Rob, will turn it over to you to start first. And each of you can just go around and a sentence or two about your working group in case people aren't familiar just with it in general, and then how it connects, if it connects to this topic.
Okay. So the Energy Development and Siting Work Group, the primary concern that we have is how energy facilities affect DoD operations and their effects on natural resources. So we're looking at transmission lines, power substations, power generation facilities, including solar and wind energy. As far as it relates to the PM2.5, we don't necessarily have any concerns with that, but I will pass that off to Becky.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, all. I'm Becky Harrison. I'm with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the Southeast At-Risk Species Coordinator, and I lead the At-Risk Threatened and Endangered Work Group. So as you've heard from others, the major concern is navigating how to help support the exceptional event demos and provide the communication across the partnership network to keep prescribed fire as a conservation tool and habitat management tool. So in terms of just exactly what Gary just said, we also want to remember that the majority of the Southeast specifically is privately owned. So we want to continue to give those conservation tools to private landowners and by increasing that communication. Lots of things were mentioned already. We're working across the working groups, but one of the things that Shan mentioned is providing the data and the need for why some of these systems need this tool, creating the habitat management, working proactively to conserve these species, and continuing to create that resiliency in the system. So do we have those already in some of our resource management plans? Can we pull some of those or use those as additional support, to help manage that and to inform our species status assessments as well? Thanks, Jen.
Hello, everybody. My name's Bruce Beard. I'm the lead for the Sentinel Landscapes Work Group, and that's all the time we have. So I just got a few things I want to say. There's 8 Sentinel landscapes here in the Southeast. There's 5 that are actually in the in the SERPPAS footprint, and there's 3 Sentinel landscapes that fall outside of the SERPPAS footprint yet that we've invited to join our Sentinel Landscapes Working Group. So why involve Sentinel Landscape coordinators in all of this? I kind of had 5 quick things to say. First is just the opportunity to connect related to prescribed fire. Getting fire on the ground should be an important outcome for all the Sentinel landscapes. So it's an opportunity for us to talk more about prescribed fire. Number 2, give Sentinel Landscapes coordinators the opportunity to understand what the change in the standard is all about. Number 3, what is the process and timing associated with this change? A lot of things we've already talked about. Item 4, how might this affect advancing prescribed fire within our Southeast Sentinel landscapes? What should coordinators know? What should they do, if anything? And then lastly, 5, are there ways in which Sentinel Landscapes coordinators and their partners assist EPA and the state fire agencies during this transitional period as a part of data gathering, reporting, so on and so forth? So our intent is to kind of report back on this meeting and make this information available to the coordinators, and then open up opportunities for communication between those actively playing in this process with the Sentinel Landscapes coordinators and their partners. Jen?
Thanks to all our coordinators for joining today and for sharing your thoughts on how people can become involved. And I'd encourage folks, like Addie mentioned at the beginning of the call, if you're not part of a working group and you'd like to be part of one, these are our, the majority. We're missing Michelle Covey with our Coastal Resilience Working Group, but feel free to reach out to us, and it's open for folks to join these working groups. And I know we are at our time now. Sorry about that to our working group leads for running a bit short, but David, I'm going to pass it over to you to wrap us up here, and then we can go ahead and close out.
All right, Jen and Addie and all of our speakers, thank you all so much for your presentations, for joining us. It was a pleasure on behalf of the Southern Fire Exchange to be able to partner with you guys on the program today.